Hello students, I'm going to be covering chapter 3 today from your textbook. So if you get out your textbook and we're in the Crossimic Way, the Essential Medical Terminology, and we're page 27. So we're going to cover chapter 3, which is on bacteria, color, and some medical terms. And so your quiz next Thursday will be on chapters 1, chapter 6, chapters 2, and chapter 3. So first of all, we're going to talk about bacteria, those lovely things that make us sick sometimes. Bacteria are minute organisms visible under a microscope that are composed of single cells and exist either on their own, they're independent or free living, or dependent upon another organization or another organism for life, like for example, a parasite, which is pretty nasty. Bacteria fall within the definition of a microbe, a minute organism typically visible under a microscope that may be bacteria, fungi, or protozoan parasite. So sometimes in the clinic, we do swabs and then we look at it under the microscopes to see what kind of bacteria that we're seeing. A lot of times we send it out to determine exactly the type of bacteria that we're dealing with. Bacteria can exist in multiple shapes and sizes. The most common way to classify them is by their shape and appearance. So DNA sequencing or the genetic makeup of the bacteria can be used to classify the bacteria types. Bacteria are located everywhere and can live in many different types of environments, including the soil, the ocean, and the human body. So when I went to Honduras one time, the missionary lady was sitting there and she had like 5 kids. And so before church started, we were like 15 minutes early. And so she was sitting there and she called each of her kids over one at a time. And then she would clean underneath their fingernails. She said she tried to do this at least twice a day and it really cut down on them getting parasites because often with so much dirt and the dirt that they're dealing with, it gets under their fingernails. And then when they eat, sometimes it gets on their food and then they eat the parasite. So, just a little tidbit there. Not all bacteria cause disease, and some are considered beneficial to maintaining health. For example, bacteria play a role in curdling milk into yogurt or aiding in digestion. So when we eat yogurt, yogurt can be, according to some researchers, one of the most healthy foods you can eat. Because it helps keep your colon healthy. It has really good bacteria in it. And I personally like that Greek yogurt. It's pretty good stuff. Alternatively, they can be a destructive source, which, like I'm sure all of you know, it can cause meningitis, tuberculosis, cholera, or pneumonia. So if you look on the next page, page 28, you're going to see different shapes of bacteria. Yikes. They look kind of nasty, like hairy little monsters. Scientists study bacteria not only to find cures for life-threatening diseases like malaria and typhoid fever, but also to create building blocks and tools for future research and treatment. For example, the study of bacteria has led to the development of the field of genomic medicine, or the study of genes and heredity. New tools have been created from studying bacteria that help to understand genes, how they work, and what happens when something goes wrong with a gene. These tools help not only treating physicians, but also epidemiologists, archaeologists, research, forensic scientists, and historians. There's actually a new multi-million-dollar business, and it's biotechnology that has emerged from this. It involves technological application that uses the biological systems, living organisms, and all their derivatives to make or modify products or processes for specific use. Okay, so table 3.1, we're going to look, we've been talking about how to break down medical terms because I want to make this as simple as we can. So the first step, like I talked about in class, is to break the word down. So you've got root words. Remember, you do your suffix, which is at the end of the word. When you're defining a medical term, the suffix first, then the prefix, then the root word. So these are root words for bacteria. Bacillus, they're bacteria that are rod-shaped. And an example would be Streptobacillus. It's a rod-shaped bacteria that grows in twisted chains. Then we've got Coccus. It's a bacteria that is round in shape, like Streptococcus. It's a round bacteria that grow in twisted chains. Then we've got Diplo or Diplococcus, which is coming in pairs. And some of these are repetitive. So it's not like we're learning every time, every chapter new. It's kind of like you'll notice, oh, we learned dye in chapter 2 also. There are round bacteria that grow in pairs. Staphylo, you've probably heard of this. It's Staphylococcus. They're round bacteria that grow in clusters. So Staphylo, they're bunches like grapes, bacteria that grow in clusters. And then Strepto is Streptococcus, and that's round bacteria that grow in twisted chains. All right. Then we've got the next page, page 29, is prefixes for color. So why is color important in medical terminology? Well, color is really important because it helps us diagnose what the problem is. So if we're looking at somebody's drainage, say, from their wound, we need to get the color right. Is it yellow? Is it red? What's the blood looking like? Is it rubra? Is it reddish? Is it like a brownish color, meaning that the bleeding is just about to stop? So color is very important for diagnosing. And so if you look here at the different, you're going to do color of cells, body fluids, reactions, skins, growth, and rashes are all important, like I said, in diagnosing and treating conditions and diseases. Okay, so alb is white, albino, a person with white hair, very pale skin, and non-pigmented irises. Chloro is green, it's chlorophyll. You probably know that one. Chromo is a chromocyte, any colored cell or pigmented corpuscle. It just means color. Sero, like cirrhosis. Cirrhosis of the liver. I was sitting in church one time as a little kid. I remember my mom said, and she was like, look at that gentleman over there. She said, look how yellow his skin is. She goes, I bet you he has a liver problem. Well, yeah, it didn't take but a couple weeks before we heard, yeah, he had severe liver problems. So, yeah, cirrhosis would be like an orange yellow, and literally people with liver problems, their skin, it's like kind of a distinctive shade of yellow. Cyan is blue for cyanosis. You do not want this. This is something, it's a bad sign when people have a bluish discoloration of skin and mucous membranes. Erythrocyte is red. Erythrocytes are the red blood cells or corpuscles containing hemoglobin, and they transport oxygen. A leuco is white. Leukocyte is a white cell, a colorless blood corpuscle whose chief function is to protect the body against microorganisms causing disease. So when you've got a white blood cell count that's high, it shows it's an indication of infection. Lutein is saffron yellow. It's a lipochrome from the corpus luteum, fat cells, and egg yolk. Melano is black. Melanoma is referring to malignant melanoma or black tumor. Poliomyelitis is a gray color. It's an acute viral disease marked clinically by fever, sore throat, headache, vomiting, and often stiffness of the neck and back. It may attack the gray matter of the central nervous system and brain, and hence the name polio. So obviously, if it's attacking the central nervous system, that's where you're going to have all the different neurological symptoms there with that. It's a pretty scary viral disease because obviously it's viral. So viral diseases do not respond to antibiotics. Purpura is a purple color. Any of the several that indicates some kind of like bleeding or hemorrhagic state. It's characterized by spots and patches of purplish discoloration resulting from the leaking of blood into the skin. Then you've got rhodopsin. It's red color and it's a visible purple. It's a photosensitive purplish red. chromoprotein in the retinal rods. So that would be in the eyes. Ruby, which would be like rubella. It's a redness. German measles, a mild viral infection marked by a pink macular rash, fever, and lymph node enlargement. All right. Yellowish, lysantho, yellowish, a yellow discoloration of the skin or the spinal fluid. So we've got, so let's go to page 30. All right, so these, remember we talked in class about prefixes, and the prefixes come at the beginning of the word, and they appear throughout the text, especially as they relate to body systems. So here's a bunch. We went over these, so I am not going to go over these again. These are, you'll notice that most of these are repetitive from what we had gone through over on for chapter 2, which is the wonderful thing about medical terminology is that it repeats itself. So I'm trying to make this, I try to make this class as simple as possible so you don't get overwhelmed when you're learning how to speak and read medical terminology. And that's why I do the clinical notes each week, because I want you reading these clinical notes so that you're used to reading this language and getting used to looking it up when you don't know what it is, because repetition is just like anything you do. If you play an instrument, it takes practice. And so learning medical terminology, it just takes a lot of practice. And like I said, being a curious learner, when you don't know what a word means, look it up. And then the next time you'll be like, I think I looked up that word last week. So then you kind of quiz yourself. I think it means this. And you look it up and you're like, oh, it doesn't, or it does, hopefully. So yeah, I'm not going to go through all these, but you'll notice a lot of these were the same ones. A meaning without or not. Brady is a slow heart rate. It's a pulse rate less than 60. So that's how many beats per minute your heart is beating. Dis, we talked about that. It means bad, painful, or difficult. Dia means like diarrhea. Doesn't sound very nice to talk about that. Abnormally frequent evacuation of watery stools. That's a fancy way of saying what diarrhea is. It means it's running through you. The stools are running through you. Okay. EU means good or easy, like euphoria. It's bodily comfort. Well-being, absence of pain or distress. Hemo, referring to blood, hemolysis. Hyper, we talked about that. It means above and beyond. Hypo means under, below. Hypertension or hypotension, or here is listed as hypoglycemia. And that is, we do a lot of those terms right now because diabetes is such an epidemic. And it's predicted the rates of diabetes are still supposed to go through the roof here in the next 20 years. Lip or lipidemia refers to fat, like hyperlipidemia, a general term for elevated concentrations of any or all of the lipids in the plasma. When you work in the clinic setting, we're always dealing with hyperlipidemia because that's another problem that we have, a lot of people have in this country. We have high cholesterol because we like to eat foods that are high in sugar and also foods that are high in fat. Alrighty, so go to page 32. You've got mega, or large, or great. We talked about that one in class. Through, like perforate, to make hole or holes through, as by punching or boring, to pierce or penetrate. Poly, like polyuria, means excessive secretion of urine. Post, I think you probably know what that means. It's after. And tachycardia would be abnormally rapid heartbeat. So these are more prefixes relating to medical terminology, and a lot of them are reviewed from before. So that's all I have for chapter 3. So for your quiz, like I said, it's on chapters 1, chapter 6, chapter 2, and chapter 3. And then if you stick with your study guide, I am very confident that you'll do extremely well on this quiz. So thank you so much. Please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions that you have. All right. Have a great day.